Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS As It Is. Welcome to the first edition of the year. Happy New Year to all of you and all the best to all your endeavors. This, the first topic of this evening is one of great solemnity, I should say. It is very troubling. And it's almost ironic for me because I remember that when I heard when I first heard about suicide as a child growing up in Guyana, it was okay. It was happening over there, or it happened to somebody you didn't really know. And so it didn't really affect me that much. Fast forward to several years ago, one of my sisters called me, my oldest sister called me early one morning to tell me a cousin of mine hung himself. It's the first time it really hit me that, wait a minute, no one no one, no one is exempt from suicide. And for those who might be out there thinking or considering it, please consider those that you're leaving behind. Consider the pain, the years of trauma, the wounds that never heal. I remember browsing the internet, and today it's hard to go in cyberspace and not see evidence of suicide. And from the reports I've been getting, suicide in Guyana is nothing new to the Guyanese psyche. But there's nothing strange when someone stops you and asks you if you know so and so died and that they just killed themselves. And after, eventually, that shock wears off, and then you go about your daily lives, and it was almost as if it's something. It is not abnormal. But what is abnormal about this is that today the word epidemic is juxtaposed with suicide in Guyana, and that to me is stunning. It's um, to me, when a nation suffers, and you're hearing in reports that this is prevalent among young people, and to me, when a nation suffers from this kind of epidemic, the wanton loss of its young, then it must be a national security crisis. For what is the future of a nation without its young? What can we do? What must we do? And I say we because it's a problem for all of us. I've decided to provide CWS's platform to discuss this matter and provide information in the hopes of not only educating people, but to find solutions. I've decided to do a five-part series on the suicide epidemic in Guyana, also because I am curious to know why suicide has become an epidemic in Guyana and what can we do about it. History, and I'm quoting Dr. King, will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. And as those profound words of the late Dr. King reminds me of the obligation of knowledge, I invite you to join us on this journey of discovery. And I want to begin with Miss Narka Carter, who's on the other side of me. Narka, good afternoon, and welcome to
Yes,
CWS As It Is.
thank you, Selwyn. This
Narka,
is
I please tell us a bit about yourself and how you become involved with suicides in Guyana.
well. How I got involved was out of confusion. I can honestly say I was a 8-year-old person, between 7 and 8, when my half sister killed herself, and I didn't understand. We were about to come to America, and I don't know. No one would explain to me exactly what happened. All they did was kept quiet. We knew something was wrong in the family, but nobody would say anything. They just kept it hush. We had a nice little wake. Everyone was there. They said great things, but no one really spoke. And it was always a question, why? And when you asked, you were always told, hush. They do that. And that was something that stuck with me for a long time. I've had other relatives as well as close friends commit suicide as well. So it's always been something that I could not quite leave behind because we're all taught to value life. And I'm trying to figure out, why would they take their lives? Lives are so precious. And so that's always been a question that I kept asking and asking. And I'm the type of person, I will ask a lot of questions and I will annoy people.
Why do you think,
But
though? Why do you think there was this preponderance of hush when you asked or you inquired about the death?
shame, shame. And if if I don't, shame within the family, and shame that if I ask, if I pretend it didn't happen, I don't have to acknowledge it. And there was also confusion because they didn't understand either. There's others looking at them that something is wrong with the family. That's why this person committed this act.
Is that
There's the issue of shame.
is that from your research and so on? Is that well? Before I
That's
go into that, Norca, tell us a little bit about your your knowledge of this or your research. Uh, would you consider yourself an authority, not on the prevention or intervention, but okay? Well, let's rephrase that a little. Tell us a little bit about your background.
my background primarily is mental health. Suicide is just it's part of that component because after all, 90% of the people who do commit this act can be diagnosed as clinically depressed.
Hmm.
So that's why I do a wraparound service. I take the whole person and everything they're going through. I just don't focus on one area. I deal with the crisis first, but I I have learned to you have to deal with every issue that's presented itself, if
What?
that makes sense.
When did you first start? When did you first start going into the field, doing research? When did this whole social work, mental health journey begin for you?
With Guyana
Hmm.
in
In Guyana.
2000,
In Guyana.
in 2000,
2000.
yes,
As you started doing your research in uh, suicides, I guess. Am I correct?
yes, correct.
What did you find that gave you pause, that surprised you?
How that how nonchalant, or I'm not even sure if that's the correct word, how everyone just took it as okay, she wants to kill herself or he wants to kill him, that's their business. They, that's I mean, people just took it. I don't know if necessarily took it as I don't care, or just they've gotten so used to hearing it or being a part of it within their community. It was just it kind of confused. It overwhelmed me.
Hmm. When, at what point did you realize that, or you may have concluded to yourself based on what you were seeing, whatever evidence or assumptions or whatever, that that this was an epidemic. This was not just, random acts here and there, but it was actually an epidemic.
Uh, I would have to say, I when I realized there was something very wrong was when they're 13-year-olds and 7-year-olds killing themselves. This doesn't. This is not right. When you're going from one funeral to the next, it can be 3 to 5 in a week.
A week?
I a week. Um, I am from my family are from the Berbice area, so that's primarily where you come back and hear this story. This person's is whispering this. This went on, and when you start checking into it, and it's like, oh, it's common.
Mm.
It's when the younger folks, I should say, you start going at such an alarming rate, you have to sit back and ask yourself, what is really going on? What's happening? What happened to that good neighbor, that family unit, that you went down the street, that everybody knew. If you got in trouble, you got in trouble with everyone. What happened? How many-
When you ask yourself those questions, Norca, perhaps there were two answers, two sets of answers. What your heart was telling you and what the data, whatever there was telling you. Let's begin with what the data was telling you.
the data was telling me the family unit is not the same anymore.
Is
I'm
what?
going to get
Sorry, I didn't get it.
The family unit, the structure,
Uh-huh.
those values are not the same as they were. I'm still going to get in trouble for that.
Okay.
It's the truth.
Well, if it's the truth, it's the truth. That's what we are here to find out. You know, you have to get to the heart of something, and before you can diagnose it and heal it. So, what was your heart telling
We're in a world of trouble.
you? Nork, I want to open that up a little bit. I mean, I give you two sets of answers you could get, and you give me these closed-ended answers to my questions.
I mean, in the sense
Let's
that
open up the data part. What did you see in your interact? First of all, when you were working as a social worker in Guyana, what region did you cover? What area did you cover?
no, I did not work as a social worker in Guyana.
Okay.
I am one of those people who stay behind the scenes and help those that are in Guyana with the issues any way that I can. I just want to make sure there are folks there struggling and they don't say anything. They work very hard. And I try to help, offer them help as much as I possibly can.
So tell us a little bit about that, about what you, as you're helping them, tell us a little bit about what you found or what they were showing you that you know caused you to give them some kind of assistance in this regard.
They needed support. They were faced with some challenging issues that there weren't outlets for them to provide the perfect service. They were limited in what they can do. There were not enough personnel. The resources that are needed to help with some of these issues are not available.
Do you have an example of, I mean, not in terms of names, but what kind of issues that, what kind of problems that you saw that were alarming to you?
One person has the roles of both the social worker and the probation officer. So when you're going to help this person, they may lock their door, they might hide away from you because they don't know which role you're coming, who are you coming as? Are you here to help me or you're here to take me away? That kind of dynamics are often the struggles for many people who are engaged in doing this work in Guyana.
From where you sat, I mean, what did you do when you were in Guyana that might have brought you in contact with this issue, this epidemic?
One of the things that I did while I was in Guyana is I went off the beaten trail, or I should say, I stayed away from the city for a while. I shut my mouth, one of the things, because the way my speech tends to get me in trouble. And I listened and I observed. I didn't try to correct anyone. I wanted to understand the daily lives, the daily struggles. For anyone to come in and say they can fix someone's problem without understanding where they're coming from, it's just going to create another problem. You have to understand where that person is in that situation. You cannot just go in and say, I have the answer or I know what to do. That will not work.
What type of approach you might have advised at any given point?
Listen. You have to use listening skills. You have to be objective. There are some issues that will arise that are going to make your stomach hurt and make you feel very uncomfortable. But you have got to not be judgmental. You have got to deal with the person in that situation as a person. You must respect, and there must be some confidentiality. You cannot try to help somebody and discuss their issue with your neighbor or talk behind their backs. And that is one of the issues that keeps raising its ugly head. And that is one of the things that people do not want to seek help because they do not want to be laughed at or made fun of. When you're seeking help and you're in a crisis, that's the last thing you need.
Nork, I want to create a scenario for you.
Go ahead.
A group of us, family and friends, are
Correct.
sitting down in the backyard drinking coconut water and whatever, and everybody is relaxed and everyone is familiar. And we just ask you, give us a few stories that you know of, not names and so on, but scenarios. So for those of us who are not familiar, much familiar with what happens in this particular arena, the suicide epidemic, who gets affected, who's not getting affected, and this sort of thing. But you want to inform and enlighten. So, what would you say? What story would you some what are some stories you would tell us?
I will tell you the story. The mother has to choose between getting her rent paid and take, the family. She's dependent on the partner she has.
Hmm.
She has to make a choice between her three children and the oldest, letting them go, even though they're not ready to go, or abuse in the home, but she cannot say anything because that friend has a friend that's a police that will protect them. These are real problems.
Hmm. What is most frustrating to you about the approach to studying and dealing with the suicide epidemic in Guyana?
It's an Indian problem. That's the most frustrating thing. What
It's
people don't realize, it's everybody's problem. For this reason, I'm going to explain.
right.
Suicide, I equate with total pain. That is why we're trying to change the paradigm from saying suicide is the killing of oneself to saying suicide is the killing of the pain and your death is incidental. Because let me give you an example. Have you ever experienced a toothache?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, amplify that 1,000 times. Were you focusing on putting on your clothes or looking good or making everybody happy? Or were you focused on how can I get rid of this pain quick so I can feel peace? What would you have done to get rid of your toothache?
Anything.
That is
Anything.
what we're trying to make people understand. When a person resorts to suicide, they're not trying to kill themselves, they're trying to get rid of the pain. That pain does not make you rational. There's nothing logical about it. Pain is just pain. And all you want to do is get rid of it. And sometimes when you seek help, people might tell you, oh, it'll be better, or pray on it, or girl, I went through this, or that's nothing, I had worse. Do not, when you say things like that, you are making that person feel less, that there's something wrong with them. You make them feel scared to ask somebody for help. Everyone is aware of some of the warning signs. When somebody is not well or something's going wrong, but it's our fear of what we can or cannot do that stops us from helping.
If you frame when you frame it that way, which is quite new to me, that someone who is thinking of committing suicide or has committed suicide is really about getting rid of the pain, then
Yes,
pain is not germane to one particular ethnic group or social
no, sir.
group. That is
That is
very
what
interesting.
that
What
is what we're trying to make people understand.
what do you want to say? What do you want to say to people who are very adamant about that? That people who commit suicide are just weak and selfish, and all the negative things apply to people who choose to end their lives. But let me rephrase that, because this is going to take some doing on all of us through education and through practice. People who are trying to get rid of the pain. Actually, I like that. I really do. What do you say to people who are resistant to looking or examining the illness or the issue that way?
I would say, let me put it to you this way. There is a report that came out and said that Guyana has between 72 to 112 persons with some form of illness, mental illness. And we all know that 90% of those up to 90%, I should say, who commit suicide can be diagnosed with clinically depressed. as clinically depressed. Now, Guyana has less than 800,000 people. So what makes you think you're exempt? Do the math.
Yeah.
Somebody in your family is hurting at this point, and when you shut that door, you're shutting the door to them. It could be your child. Because right now, children are between the age of 12 and 18 are the most troubled group in Guyana. I did not make that statistic up.
12 and 18.
So 12 and 18. So if you have a child in school, believe me, they're facing some pressure, because the challenge now for everybody is you have to be, you're not competing against just your school anymore. You're competing against the country as well as folks outside. So everyone is going to feel some form of pain sometime. So I would ask people to be more open-minded and think about it. Even if you do not understand, just listen for a minute. You might be saving your own.
Can you repeat that? Listen for a moment. Mm-hmm.
You might be saving your own. People are quick to open. One of the problems I have, and you and I have spoken about this before, is communication skills. Folks are good at giving advice, but are not good at taking advice. Folks are good at responding to questions. They don't respond to understand what's being said. They respond just to make sure that they get their point across. Sometimes you have to sit back 5 minutes and just listen. You'll be surprised at what you do hear. Those children who are exposed to suicides, whether people want to believe it or not, they know a lot more than you think. So I would advise parents, family, auntie, mothers, uncles, or anything, take that 2 or 3 minutes when that child come home and ask them, how was your day? What did you do? Go back to being parents. There are those who are yelling that, and I understand why, that the government needs to do more. The government needs to do more. I understand, and I grant you they do. But while you're waiting for the government to do more, what are you going to do? That's what I always ask. You can start with your own at home. Be that parent you need to be. I don't care if you're a grandmother, auntie, cousin, go back to the family. It starts at home.
In a recent broadcast,
Nobody wants to cry. Nobody wants to cry.
In a recent broadcast, Norca, the President of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger, mentioned that the Ministry of Health has launched a suicide prevention strategy, I think in as far back as recent as September. What are your thoughts on that? How is that helpful?
I am grateful that the issue has been brought, is no longer in the closet. And I've told someone else that. It's now on the forefront. It's now that it's not just being screamed at or advocated by those of us on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want for folks to understand, it's not just the Minister of Health that's going to have to work on this issue. It's going to be all the ministers. It's going to be everyone. Everyone's have a role to play. Because there's the education minister, there's the social minister, there's the cohesion minister. You have to bring people together at that table, and you have to be able to give and take. You have to listen. This problem is not going to be fixed tomorrow. It didn't start yesterday, and it's not going to be fixed tomorrow. It's going to take some time. It is going to require, you're going to run into some roadblocks. You're going to have to be adaptable as well as flexible. And most of all, folks are going to have to, and I mean with all sincerity, be willing to change some of their behavior and some of their thinking. And that is not going to be very easy.
In all your experience and research and knowledge, have you ever come across any strategy, any initiative, strategy I should say, that works in the intervention or prevention of suicides?
The strategy to have is respect, confidentiality, and being honest with that person, letting them know I don't have all the answer, but we're going to work at this together. Showing that person genuine care, not that you're just there, oh, I'm here to fix this and I'm gone. I have all the answer. That is why I choose to work with one person at a time. And that it doesn't mean solely that one person. It means that entire family. Because you have to provide that person with the skill so whenever issues arise again, they're able to handle the crisis better. I'm hoping I'm conveying that it really starts at home.
Norca, you are privy to the cyber chatter on suicide epidemic in Guyana. You're I mean, there's one um, inbox where several of us were discussing the this whole issue and some of the problems and so on and so forth. But what do you
Right.
think? What do you think personally is missing in this discourse, or do you believe, from what you've seen, everything is being covered? What is one thing you think we need to be talking about?
One of the things I think we need to be talking about is being aware of our limits.
Would you like to elaborate a little on that, please?
You have to know where your strengths lie.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know what you can and cannot do. You cannot just jump into an issue there because, for instance, I am anything that has to do with a rape of a child, I am not very good at handling. So you have to know I am all for providing that child with service, but I will have to find someone who's able to deal with that case better because I will have issue of transference. Because for me, children are the future and innocent. And for that to happen, I will not be able to provide the service without thinking of some very detrimental thoughts of what I'd like to do to the person that commit this act.
Ah, I see. I see. What troubles you the most about this epidemic?
That it's continuing at an alarming rate. And there are folks who still say, if they want to die, let them die.
Ah, if you had the ear of the president and the ministers of the government, I know you've given us several points just now what you would tell of which ministries should be involved. But if you had the ears of the president and let's say specifically the health minister, what would you tell them? Two things.
Sir, I would kindly ask you, before you make all your strategies, please go and have a conversation with those in those areas that are suffering. Do not go in there with preconceived ideas. Go in there with a blank slate and ask them what is going on. They may slam the door in your face. You can't just go one time. But you have got to put boots on the ground. You have to go back to where it's happening. Why is it happening? You have to ask those questions. I'm grateful for all the experts and everything, but that person, that family, that community needs to know that they have a voice in what's going to happen or how this is going to be handled.
Let's go back to that group of us at the back of the yard drinking coconut water and listening. I don't know how many of us will still be sipping after hearing about this suicide epidemic, but let's go back there. What would surprise us if you were to tell us about some of the which areas, geographical locations, will surprise us to learn have lots of suicides taking place? That is not necessarily public knowledge.
I'm not telling you that.
Okay. All right. Is this is this private information or private preservation?
It's not private information. One of the things that I have found out is that when folks find out that a certain area has a high prevalence of suicide, all of a sudden that area gets stigmatized.
I understand.
I'm not adding to that burden.
I
No,
understand.
I can't.
What would you say is your biggest concern, your deepest fear about the suicide epidemic in Guyana?
That we're going to hear about what we're going to do, and then nothing really gets done.
Wow. And what are you personally doing to help in this?
This year, my focus, because I stretched myself thin last year, this year my focus is one person at a time. Because I'm using the philosophy, each one teach one. I'm hoping whatever skills I offer and that person learns, they will transfer it to someone else.
And this is a personal commitment.
This is a personal commitment. This is something that you're never going to find on Facebook or anything like that, because I'll never tell you their name.
What triggered you to do this? What was the trigger?
The trigger, I have to say honestly, it was a conversation with Annan and myself one night on Facebook. We were both very angry because it's like nothing was being done, or I got tired of the doors being slammed in my face. Mm-hmm. Why are you bothering? Why are you trying to make Guyana look bad? One thing I want everyone to understand is that every 40 seconds in this world, on this earth, someone dies by the suicide. So do not believe that Guyana is the only one faced with this issue. It's a worldwide problem.
Thank you, Norca, so much. Yeah, for more, hope you will return and share some of your knowledge and experience with us, perhaps in a panel discussion or so. But thank you so much for taking your time with us to share with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having this, because this is essential. I just want everyone to understand all of us can do something. Do not be afraid to try. Be more afraid of losing that person than trying.
That's a good note to end on. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
You're welcome.